Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here on this chilly morning, or maybe you're cozy at home, and we don't blame you. But if you made it here, wow, we're really grateful. It's really awesome. It's great to see all your faces here in the space. We're going to lead you in some worship, and we'd love you to join us. If you'd like to join us standing or whatever posture you're able to assume, we'd love you to join us. So thanks for being here. Instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me sow light. For in the giving we shall receive, and in the dying we're given life. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is sorrow, let me sow hope. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. For in the injury your pardon give, your consolation to those in pain. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Amen. Amen. I could just sit and wait for all your goodness, hope to feel your presence. I could just stay home, I could just stay right where I am and hope to feel you, hope to feel something again. I could hold on. I could hold on. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. I could be safe, oh, I could be safe here in your arms and could hold on. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. I could be safe, oh, I could be safe here in your arms and never leave home. Never let these walls down, but you have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. Will you lead me? You'll lead me, Lord. I will be yours, so I will be yours for all my life. I will be yours, so I will be yours for all my life. And I will be yours, so I will be yours for all my life. I will be yours, so I will be yours for all my life. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. Will you lead me? You lead me, Lord. You lead me. You lead me, Lord.
You can take your seats.
This will be short, don't worry. So, since this is a congregation that encourages prayer and meditation, I wanted to share something that has really helped helped me breathe, which is an important part of prayer and meditation. So it's really helped me. If it helps you, great. If not, then don't worry about it. But when I was in college, I took some singing voice lessons, and the instructor told me to let's see. By the way, can you see? Okay. The instructor told me to breathe in. So of course I sucked in my stomach and puffed out my chest because I thought that's what breathing in. I thought that's what that meant. And he encouraged me to. He suggested that I try imagining breathing into my stomach. And he said, put your hand, against your stomach and just relax your stomach and imagine breathing into your stomach, and try to push, as you imagine the air coming into your stomach and pushing against against your hand. That's a good way to, if you're breathing into your stomach for the first time, that's a good way to start the practice. So now, whenever I am praying, meditating, or just when I'm stressed and need to calm down, instead of doing this, I relax my stomach and I breathe into my tummy. Let me just do that now because I'm a little bit nervous. I haven't spoken in front of a group in a long time. So let's take a minute and a half and just try this together. And you can follow. You'll probably be able to hear me breathing, so you can follow me, or you can just breathe on your own. 15 minutes. That's too long. Okay. 1 minute. All right. How does this timer sound? Yeah, that's nice. All right. And don't be too. I guess some other side things that I'll squeeze in here is just we've Vince and Hayley and others from the front have mentioned this a lot, but don't if it doesn't work, if you're not feeling any particular way, that's okay. Sometimes when I start meditation or breathing, I will think like, okay, I really need to feel peace. This better feel good. It's like, okay, I'm 30 seconds in. Why don't I feel peaceful yet? And if at the end you don't feel great, that's okay. But let's just try this for a minute and 30 seconds together. Just relaxing your stomach, using your hand kind of as a guide, pushing against your hand if you have to. I'm sorry. All right. Well, hopefully that, if that was helpful for you, then great. As we've said from the front before, these are just tools. We don't want to cut the foot to fit the shoe, if that makes sense. But this has helped me, and if it helps you, great. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Especially if that's helpful for you, as Ben is kind of teaching us some mechanics there, we have 3 contemplative prayer meetups, a group that's going to meet next Saturday, and then the next 2 consecutive Saturdays that I'll be leading, we'll be employing some breathing practices. And the idea is to lean into that meditative or contemplative side of the Christian tradition. So if you're interested in that, you can grab me after service if you're not already signed up for those contemplative prayer meetups. We would love to sing one more song in prayer together. Would you stand with us if you'd like? All who are weak, all who are weary, come to the rock, come to the fountain. All who have sailed on the rivers of heartache, come to the sea. Come on, be set free.
If you lead me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. Come and heal me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. I will go. I will go.
All who are weak and all who are weary, come to the rock, come to the fountain. And all who have climbed on the mountains of heartache, reach to the stars. Come on, give your life.
If you lead me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. Come and heal me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. I will go. I will go.
Heal me, heal me, heal me, heal me.
If you lead me, Lord, I
Heal
will
me.
follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I
Heal
will
me.
go. Come and heal me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. If you lead me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead
to the rock, come to the fountain.
If you lead me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. Come and heal me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. If you lead me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. Come and heal me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. I will go. I will go. I will go. I will go.
And maybe as we're standing, if you want to try and do another deep few breaths into your tummy, as Ben was teaching us.
If you lead me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. Come and heal me, Lord, I will follow. Where you lead me, Lord, I will go. I will go. I will go. Thank you. You may be seated.
If we can give the band a round of applause. Thank you so much for leading us in worship this morning. My name is Hayley, and I'm one of the pastors here at Brown Line Church. Special hello to you if you are new or newer joining with us. If I haven't gotten the chance to say hi to you yet, I hope that we get to chat at some point this morning. Brown Line Church is both a local church and an online community. So if you are joining us from home, welcome to you as well. We use an app called Discord for a chat feature during our services. So I'll put the QR code on the screen for that. So regardless of how you're joining, if you're in the Davis Theater with us or at your own home, probably a little bit warmer and cozier there, you can feel free to participate in the chat this way. You can ask any questions in there, and we have a moderator. I think, who's the moderator today? Melissa is our moderator, so she will be there to answer any questions, to help guide conversations, and it's really helpful for Vince and I to be able to see all of the comments there, so we love when there's participation in Discord. When you are here at Brown Line Church, it's our hope that you would be able to experience the chance to slow down and rest, that you would have rest and resonance in being here, like Ben helped us through this morning, to be able to have moments to breathe in an otherwise just really fast-paced life. This church was started particularly for people who tend to feel more comfortable in progressive settings, and we are a church that is rooted and open. We are rooted in the Christian tradition, but we are open and curious about all that is within us and all that is around us. So we hope that you find connection with a God of love here and connection with community as well. We have the opportunity now for our kids to have their own time and space in Theater 3. So we'll have Miss Abby and Miss Becca in the back corner. They'll head over to Kids Church for a little while, and then they can come back over here and join us at the very end of the service. So if your child would like to join in that and it's your first time here, we just need to make sure that we have a phone number with Miss Abby and Miss Becca so they can get a hold of you if they need anything. So right in this back corner, you can feel free to join over there, and they will get brought back at the end of the service around communion time. So with that, I'll invite up Vince, who's going to join me for this message today.
Right.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
It's good to sing with y'all.
All right. So this year, we are starting off the new year with a series on suffering. A couple weeks ago, we introduced a tension that we all may feel in life. This is the tension between alleviating suffering and embracing suffering. So we hold these in tension: alleviate and embrace. Longing to bring about change and longing to radically accept what has taken place, to find a solution, to fix things, and to sit within the pain. And so while one or the other may be stressed by popular culture or by the groups that we are a part of, a full life and a realistic life has both, alleviating suffering and embracing suffering. We see this tension navigated in really helpful ways through the life of Jesus, who is the synthesis, the bringing together of embracing and alleviating. And navigating this tension is a helpful reminder that our identity is not our suffering, nor is it removed from our suffering. We've been using the word dialectic to help our understanding with this. So Vince, I'm wondering if you can just give us a really quick reminder of what a dialectic is.
Dialectic is sometimes used in academic settings, or it's used in psychology settings. So perhaps you're familiar with dialectical behavior therapy, or you've experienced that before. And the idea is that the idea is that the greatest wisdom can emerge from holding two things in tension, not choosing one or the other, but allowing a new sort of truth to emerge from the tension. And so the words in the academic version of a dialectic are a thesis, and then an antithesis, maybe you've heard those words before, and then you get a synthesis. And so what we're sort of suggesting with a little bit of why we wanted to talk about that balance of alleviating and embracing suffering is that in general in the modern world, as we've mentioned throughout these messages, we're really comfortable with alleviating suffering. That's our knee-jerk response most of the time. We want to advance science and technology to alleviate as much suffering as possible. And that's a really, really good thesis. That's good, like great thing about the modern world. And also, there are these times in life, we shared some last time we were up here a couple weeks ago. There are different experiences that especially those who are marginalized or on the outside of power are going to experience that as an antithesis to that. Like, there's no way to alleviate this. If we continue beating our head against a locker thinking that we can alleviate it, we're just bitter and cold, and that's not getting us anywhere. So the antithesis is there's some degree of embracing suffering that's required in life. And as Hayley was mentioning, we sort of see that balance, the new truth emerge by looking at Jesus as this perfect example of a synthesis of those two.
Thanks. Yeah. So today we are going to take some helpful questions that we saw in Discord a couple weeks ago, and then a couple of questions that we've been thinking about on our own as well. And we're going to have a question and response, not a Q&A, because we don't have the answer.
No answers, none whatsoever.
we have some ideas, though.
I really like Q&R. I really need. We need to move toward that. That's like a politically correct term that I'm all for. Like, yes, we should say more Q&R, less Q&A. Certainty. Not going to arrive at that this morning, but I think we can helpfully talk about things.
Yes.
All right.
And if you've got more questions or ideas that come to mind too, please continue to put those in Discord.
In the chat, yes. Please do so. All right. So the first one that we wanted to poll was we're going to poll the chat from Discord directly from Rebecca, who had a really wonderful just turn of phrase. She said, "I would love more of an exploration of which sufferings are worth the journey of acceptance." Embrace, right? Mm-hmm. And which are worth a dedicated opposition to their existence. Just really well written there, Rebecca. So I thought that was really, really well it captures those two sides. And then I think a worthwhile conversation is which sufferings are which, right? I think that's kind of where all of us want to go. And my response, rather than answer to that, is, gosh, I just don't know if there's a perfect criteria for a distinction. I think it makes sense that we want that. It makes sense that we would long for it just to feel obvious that, like, oh, when I'm experiencing X, Y, or Z, it obviously falls into this category. And when I'm experiencing A, B, and C, it obviously falls into this category. I don't think we have that. Now, I think that there are cases where it's a little bit more clear and a little bit more hazy, and maybe we can touch on those. But yeah, I think like even meaningless or random or unfair suffering, like I mean, important to my story is experience of cancer, which I think is meaningless suffering. There's no greater meaning behind cancer. It just is a terrible thing that we experience, or a hurricane, or racism, meaningless sufferings, unfair sufferings. Even those, like, they have to be heroically transformed into meaning making, or we do become that bitter, cold, cynical person who is blame shifting and like there's no way forward there, right? So I think that's actually one of God's primary activities in the world, is taking things that were meaningless or unfair or unjust and like humiliating those horrible things to redeem them into something that shapes us for the better. I think that's a beautiful thing that people have found in faith for many, many centuries. So I guess my overall response, of the idea of like, can we identify which is which? Before maybe you can texture this a little bit more about like what's clear and what's not. But I do think this is my bend toward why we need a spiritual life. Is like, in each context, I need to present this new thing that I'm facing, or this new experience that's staying inside me and rattling around. God, what do I do here? And then the next day, maybe it's the same suffering, but because I'm different than I was the day before, I'm feeling differently about it, and I still need to present it. And maybe the wisdom for me there from God is the reverse, And so it's always day by day, moment by moment. I think this is the reason for a prayer life. Maybe I'll stop there, and you can texture, and then I have one more thought, though, before we finish. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that may be helpful is thinking about if this is an instance of suffering that happened in the past, or if it's an ongoing suffering.
And play that out. Why are those different? Yeah.
I mean, with the past being in the past, there's this term from DBT therapy that of radical acceptance, that sometimes we just need to radically accept what has taken place, and there's no really going back to that problem, that instance, and fixing it in any way. So embrace would almost always be your only option there.
Yes.
But if it's a matter of ongoing suffering, I think it's going to be a lot more of a blend of the two.
So it's not just something that happened to me long ago, but I'm actively being hurt by a relationship or by a certain situation in my life. Then we probably do want to activate that alleviate side a little more. Yeah,
and for me, I've started to think about embracing suffering as a starting point, not a landing place. Especially if the suffering is ongoing. That seeing embrace as a starting point kind of helps shift this into a both and instead of an either or, which I love to do. This inward work of acceptance that allows us to pursue healing and meaning making for our individual lives, that's certainly a part of embrace. But there's also this process of acceptance that has to take place in order to oppose suffering. So it feels like a really helpful launching point to me.
I like that. And then it sort of takes away some of the pressure. It's a little bit like what Ben was evoking. We're like, I've been doing this for 30 seconds. Why don't I feel peace yet? Like, I've been trying to embrace my suffering. Why haven't I embraced it yet? To think of it as a starting point maybe takes away the pressure of I have to get to some arrived point where I've embraced that suffering.
Yeah, exactly.
So the word that we introduced a couple of weeks ago that I think is helpful to bring in here is courage. And the important thing that we want to distinguish when we use the word courage in religious settings is we're not talking about courage to be certain, like consequences be damned. I think that is sometimes taught in American Christian settings of what courage is you're certain even if those other people are telling you you can't be certain. And I don't think it's that. I think it's almost the reverse. It's courage to face uncertainty. And so the titan of theology that would have talked about this in the mid-20th century is this theologian Paul Tillich, who who wrote this book, The Courage to Be. And the idea is that the courage to be, like to exist in the face of things that threaten you with non-existence. The things that, suffering, or the things that like you're going to die someday, or meaninglessness in life. Against that, all of those great threats of uncertainty, which aren't going to go away. I can't like wish them out of existence. Do I have the courage to live? Do I have the courage to choose to be? And it's this really beautiful, I think, idea that I can really get behind. If courage is not courage to be certain, but it's this, courage to be certain is almost like a negative coping mechanism. It's no different than like binging food or a substance or an entertainment, right, to like feel better about myself. I'm just going to choose, I'm certain about fill in the blank. But the idea that so much of life is never going to be so locked down, and so what is part of moving forward in life when we all face suffering is the courage to just put one foot in front of the other and say, I will continue to exist even so. That to me is really beautiful, and it strikes me as it's also that kind of embracing being a starting point rather than a landing point.
Yeah. There's a Anne Lamott quote that this reminds me of. She says that courage is fear that has said its prayers.
Love it, yes.
Courage is fear that has said its prayers. And I think that the spiritual element you're getting at, it really is such a partnership with God, not trying to find the right answer of how to handle sufferings or how to handle things in your life, that there's this like certain faithful way to navigate it, but instead being able to partner with God as things are unfolding. That fear isn't the opposite of courage, but we're seeing ourselves through fear by partnering with God.
I just think that anybody who is simplifying life or reducing life down to basic like rules or principles that always hold true, I just think they're trying to sell me something, and this is an antidote to that. It is, there will be uncertainties that you cannot solve. We'll be asking, should I alleviate or should I embrace? And we don't know what the answer is, but where does God exist in that? God is the one who is helping me face that uncertainty alongside me, not the one who's like has the certain answer and for some reason is withholding from me.
Yes, yeah, exactly. All right, should we shift to the next?
Yeah, let's do the next question. Mm-hmm.
So Ed wrote, suffering is not experienced equally through different communities and identities. Equity plays a role in this conversation. Mm-hmm. So the question that we've got out of that is, what role does equity play in this dialectic of alleviate and embrace? So it absolutely plays a huge role. On the embrace side, I think it's really problematic, in line with some of what we discussed last weekend for MLK weekend, for someone who holds privilege and power to tell someone else, you must embrace your suffering.
Right.
That's problematic.
Yes.
For an example, the white clergy that King is addressing in Letter from Birmingham Jail that are just telling him to wait in the midst of injustice, just wait, embrace what's going on. That is problematic and not helpful.
And I mean, that's often the part of the Dr. King story that is not usually told today, where Dr. King is transformed from this person who was a pariah in the 60s and 70s to now like everybody is celebrating him, but we don't talk about those things. We don't talk about those more cutting, biting things that he said of like, hey, this takes some sacrifice on the part of those who are not used to having so much suffering that they have to alleviate.
Yeah. And at the same time, the message of embrace your suffering may be a lifeline of survival if it's being communicated from someone who has actually experienced the suffering firsthand.
Yes.
He critiques the white clergy that are telling him to wait and be patient, but then he also, in some of his own prayers with his own people in his own congregations, is saying, you have to have patience to endure. There will be justice now. I fully believe that, and there's a greater justice to come. And those message of patience sound very, very different depending on the context.
I love that. One of the things that I remember learning several years ago when we did a series of messages called God of the Oppressed, and we sort of tried to take a look at the different images of God from different marginalized positions that are represented in our communities and that are represented in like the rich theological texts out there. And one of the things that I remember we took away with is it matters who says it.
Yes.
And that is so, like, for a white guy who, like me, who has like never had to like claw for a voice in a room. I mean, I don't know, I kind of disappear in parties because I'm a little bit introverted in that setting, but like if there's a microphone and there's rules, like who's not gonna ask questions if I come up, right? And so I don't get it. I wanna say everything. I wanna be like, but I figured that out and I wrote it and it's perfect and it's an airtight logic and shouldn't I just be the communicator of that? And then I realize, no, it matters who says it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes like coming from me, something is wrong, whereas coming from a different person who experiences life in a different way and from a different perspective and a more marginalized perspective, something is right.
Exactly. Yeah. There's also some other elements of embrace I've been thinking about because of our conversation around King's work last week. A lot of times we're using this to mean acceptance or meaning making. And I think there's also an element of embrace that means taking responsibility for. Mm-hmm. So to collectively and individually embrace our complacency and injustices, then we can allow ourselves to move past shame and actually act in effective ways. So whether we're talking about just a personal wrongdoing or some systemic injustice that we've benefited from, I think there's a lot of importance in taking responsibility for our role, and that is a part of embrace.
Yeah.
Brené Brown says that shame is not an effective motivator. And so if we want to actually be able to move forward, this act of embrace, of taking responsibility for, is a really freeing thing that helps us be moved forward into justice, not from this way of like, oh, I feel so bad about myself and now I need to change. Of, no, I can see a greater vision for what good could take place. I can see the alleviating work that I need to participate in, but that required me to actually embrace the role that I have played.
That's interesting. So it's not, it's embracing being on the side of complicit with somebody else's suffering, not just embracing my own experience of suffering.
Yeah, and it's a helpful reminder that embracing is not the stamp of approval. I'm not saying I'm complacent in this and that's great.
Yes.
No, I'm saying I'm embracing this as something that I, whether knowingly or unknowingly, have participated in so that I can move forward in an act of alleviating.
Absolutely. And I think that gets to, like, how can one have courage, like we're talking about, or do that embrace work? I mean, something that I speak on regularly here on Sundays is the more philosophical side of this, of like, when we embrace suffering, are we saying that God approved of that suffering? Or even are we saying God passively allowed that suffering to happen? And it's really important to me to say no. It's actually like my read of like the image of God that I find worthy of worship, or that I see reflected in the life of Jesus, is a God that isn't actually approving or passively allowing the worst experiences of meaningless suffering in our world. But how do I, can you embrace them nonetheless? Absolutely, I think you have to. And so it's sort of a different conversation. Like I think I preach kind of regularly about like how do we make philosophical sense of that, but it's important that we can say that we can embrace suffering without giving it approval. I really like the way you said that.
Just one more thing I'll add into in terms of alleviating when we're talking about equity. I think it can be tempting for those of us who hold more privilege to separate out personal suffering from systemic suffering, to hold those separately or on some type of scale. But I've been thinking about it the past week or so as a Venn diagram, personal suffering and systemic suffering. And for some of us, there may be a lot of overlap of those two categories. And for others, there may not be a whole lot in the middle. And I think it's just something to be conscious of when it comes to awareness around differences in energy and resources and capacity, but also awareness around who has the most practice with navigating this dialectic and navigating the tension of alleviating and embracing and letting those voices lead the way in the conversation.
And so when you're talking about those two circles, like personal suffering would be like, anybody can get ill. Anybody can, get injured and then, have some sort of hospital visit. But then the systemic side would be like, well, but once you're in the hospital, not everybody is treated the same way. And there's empirical research to suggest that if you're a person of color, you get different treatment. And so for some of us, there's going to be more that's in that center area of the Venn diagram, whereas for others of us, more of it will just be personal. Am I describing that correctly?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And impacts our capacity to be able to participate in things. And I think there can be a lot of assumption of someone else's role in alleviating or embracing, and just being conscious of that, of am I trying to separate out these two categories?
That's another it matters who says it kind of thing. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything else on?
No, that's it feels like we've opened up a lot of doors and closed none, so maybe we should move on. Another question that I sort of polled, looking at a lot of the things that people were writing in on Discord a couple of Sundays ago, is how comforting or not is it to pass on wise words or quotations or scriptures, if we're in a Christian setting, that are meant to encourage one another in suffering? How comforting or not is that? And I think where I come away on this, if I can give as firm a response as I can, is it is comforting if we're mindful of context. It usually is not comforting if we're universalizing. So because there are different kinds of suffering, like they're just lots. And so quotes and proverbs and scriptures from the Bible are addressing all different types, and it can be shockingly easy to misapply like a little line taken out of context. But then if you, especially with scripture, if you zoom out a little bit more, you start, like if somebody throws a scripture at you, and I'll give an example of this in a second, and you read the one line and it's like, oh, that really applies. But then you zoom out and you read the whole chapter from which that line comes, and you're like, oh my God, like, what is this person trying to say to me? So I want to give some examples. In the Bible, there are lots of examples of responses to meaningless or random or unfair suffering. Example of this would be from the book of Ecclesiastes, which is this sort of, it's sort of the most, I would say, if you want to read the Bible and be like, whoa, that's in the Bible, read Ecclesiastes. It's awesome. It's just like somebody like endlessly complaining and musing about how the world and life is meaningless. And so it's really a modern book, you know. Like one of the famous lines from Ecclesiastes is, I see the sinful prosper and the righteous die. And what is this meaninglessness? So that's really represented in the scriptures. That idea that there is suffering that happens that has no greater purpose behind it. It's just awful. Why? If there was, you know, some sort of like balancing force in the universe that could fix all of this, if there was no such thing as injustice and it was all just a neat, tidy economy, then the righteous would live and prosper, and the cruel and the violent would not. And that's just not the world we live in, right? So we have to represent that. On the other side, there is lots in Scripture that talks about suffering that does have purpose. And it is important that we kind of represent that. And so these would be lines like from the book of Hebrews, the Lord disciplines those he loves. And I think in those sorts of categories, like we're talking about like the kind of thing that like if I'm thinking about a leadership context and I'm seeing somebody step into abilities and capacities that they've never done before, and you know what, I just kind of like, ooh, I'm going to give you a little bit more than you feel like you can handle, and just kind of see if you sink or swim. It's a little bit destabilizing for that person. It kind of feels like some suffering, and yet they come out stronger in the end. That's an example of like an experience of a short-term moment of suffering that does have purpose. Now, if we apply the Lord disciplines those he loves to the person who is grieving their mother losing cancer, what happens, right? That's a problem. That's misapplying one instance or an example of suffering and universalizing it to go somewhere else. If we talk to the person who's having a hard time because they're kind of out on their own for the first time in their life, and they're being kind of like the reel is being let out, and oh my gosh, like this is exciting, this is a real chance for them to grow, but their response is just like, nobody takes care of me, and they're just blame shifting left and right. Like they're applying meaninglessness to their experience when it's actually like, I think there's something going on here that has purpose. That also is inappropriate. We're misapplying. We're universalizing in those situations. So I think it's really important that we understand what is it that the quote that we're wanting to pass on is, what's the context of it before we pass it on to somebody. Otherwise, we get into these situations where We're telling somebody who is in deep pain that God allowed their suffering for a reason, or we're telling somebody who's really at a crucible moment in their life where something good could come out of it, and we just kind of give them a raft to skate free.
Yeah. So context, biblical context really matters. And I also think relational context really matters as well. So a couple more examples that come to mind for me. The language of take up your cross in Matthew. Jesus says, to be my disciple, take up your cross and follow me. It's this idea of it's just my cross to carry. It's my suffering to bear. It's so easy to universalize that and apply it everywhere and say that the only way to follow Jesus is through suffering. And the logical conclusion that you come to out of that is, well, God must have given me this suffering to draw me closer. That's not a huge leap there. Suffering that is designed by God, and that feels really icky and not fun there.
And that's not a way forward, that kind of feeling. That sounds like somebody who's despairing and stuck, right?
Exactly. But instead, this idea, we could be viewing suffering as just something we encounter inevitably in life and something we don't have to carry alone. So it's the difference of how it's applied. And the other example that comes to mind where I feel like relationship really matters, this scripture out of 1 Peter, that cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. In some circumstances, that may feel really comforting and hopeful, that we have a God who cares and is close in suffering and in our anxieties. But then in other circumstances, it may just feel like the suggestion to stop being anxious. Have you tried that? Just to stop being anxious? Which is removed and not particularly helpful. So this can be really easy to jump to, well, maybe your anxiety or fear or depression or whatever it may be is on you because you haven't given that to God enough. And so there's these harmful messaging that I think it was Rebecca who said in the chat a couple weeks ago that the church can kind of hop on these things and use it as harmful messaging that really just perpetuates whatever suffering is going on instead of offering something that's comforting.
And the danger is when we universalize, right? Because it's not as though that message shouldn't be used in some circumstances. It's not as though there aren't relationships where the correct permission and care and trust is there, where one can encourage another with such a phrase or such a scripture or such a inspiring quote. But to suggest that the power is in the quote itself or the scripture itself rather than the scripture lived out in connection with another human being, that's where we get into problems. Because then again, that's where we start to pick things out and they're divorced from their biblical context, and we start to over-apply them when it's boy, I feel like this is, if we get to the greater context, we always have to keep in mind of what is, if we take the largest bird's eye view possible of the ministry of Jesus, are the things that we're doing or saying supposedly in the name of that divorced in some way? That happens when we somewhere along the way from that bird's eye view down to that very particular verse end up taking something out of context. That's where it happens.
We had a concrete answer for this one.
Hey, we did.
Context matters.
Context matters. So there we go. You thought you were coming here without answers. Nope.
All right, so we can move to our last question here. So this is a question that I had been thinking about since our first conversation. Can we only embrace our own suffering and our own role in suffering? And this is one I'm just genuinely curious to hear what other people think as well. Because I do think that whether we are the one who has caused or participated in suffering, or we are the sufferer, there's embrace work that needs to be done in order to move forward. We take responsibility for our role so we don't operate out of shame. We use radical acceptance for the sake of our own healing. But I don't know if we can embrace someone else's suffering. And why I think that this question matters, for those of you who have ever felt like you are in a kind of fixer, helper, parental, peacemaker role in some way.
In your family or in your workplace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can be really tempting to try and unintentionally micromanage someone else's journey and suffering.
Card carrying.
This brings to mind for me Vince's friend Natasha, her comment from a message a while back when she joined us, where we have to trust people to be an expert on themselves. Which is just really important. We have to trust people to be an expert on themselves. And we can't assume what someone else's process of alleviating or embracing suffering may be. And that's difficult, especially when our own suffering is wrapped up in someone else's. So this is just a genuine question I have. Are there times we need to embrace or we can embrace someone else's suffering?
Yeah, I think I go back to not for reasons of equity, but for reasons of just like every human being is different. I go back to the it matters who says it, right? Like I think one of the life lessons for me has been realizing there are people like really close to me who I deeply care about that I have longed to be in that helper position to help them embrace suffering. And it's just like, it's impossible for it to be me. And how hard that was to accept. And how I still kind of like kick against that sometimes and think, no, but I can help because, but it's just, sometimes it's just not possible. It needs to be somebody else who's that helper. It needs to be them, right? It's up to their courage at this point. So yeah, I suppose, I think we can maybe take that question too far and think like, we can be too individualistic about it, like, not my problem. And I think that's not okay. I've heard it said, I really like this phrase of, we are not responsible for each other, but we are responsible to each other. And I wonder if that is somewhat helps you navigate, of like, I cannot do the work for somebody else of embracing, because that is something that, if we're right, if there is some sort of spiritual thing that has to go on for each person, maybe in every moment, I'm not inside another person. I can't do that. And yet, of course, like the drive to want to be there, to be the protector or fixer or helper, is not a bad one. It's just a bad one if we are not, doing our own spiritual work to say, God, what is wisdom in this moment? What is me being present to this person in this moment? And we're just kind of like going compulsively. Chances are we're going to overstep that bound.
Yeah, I think boundaries are just really important with this one.
Yeah. And again, like not in a way that chooses one side of attention there, of like overly boundaried or anything goes, but something that feels like this is wisdom for this moment, and it could change, and it could morph, and it could transform and grow, and all of that. If we're able to get away from that idea of like, I'm going to arrive at the certain ethic that will always hold true, and I just open the book and go to the glossary of this type of suffering, I do this. If we can remove the idol that is, and instead embrace that more, all right, in this moment now, God, what is wisdom? That's where I think we start to experience these things as challenging but not overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think it feels comforting to think that there would be some type of set ethic or set framework of a nice little flow chart of, okay, when this happens, this is my response, and this is how I handle it. But it's actually so much more comforting to say that we have a partnership with God as things are unfolding, as we actively choose what is courageous and hopeful and healing moment to moment, that flexibility actually brings about a lot more comfort than having some set up rule that we can return to.
Well, and if we are somebody who has a hard time believing all of the time, we use the phrase a lot that we're all sort of skeptics and believers at the same time in the modern world. And if you're somebody who has a hard time believing, I think it's a much more believable and worthy of worship picture of God to imagine God next to me facing an uncertain future, rather than that God who is out in the future, who knows the finish line, and just for some reason won't give it to me. But the idea of the God who's not outside of time and not outside of this world with me, but there alongside me. We've just finished the Christmas season celebrating the incarnation. God comes and is among people. That is, to me, a picture that that God is being is kinder, is less distant, is more trustworthy, is not lying to me, treats me like an adult. Those are the type of people that I want to follow, and I think that's the type of God that I want to follow.
And a God that has known suffering and has known the intricacies of it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Vince, I'd love if you could close us in prayer.
I would love to pray. All right, so maybe just in jumping again off of Ben's helping us with the breathing mechanics, we want you to get comfortable, okay? I often relate to what he was saying about I'm hunched up, or I'm listening to Hayley, and I'm kind of in like, why am I in that uncomfortable position? My gosh, this is really weird. So I'm going to sit back. Perhaps you are Ooh, okay. Yeah, you can close your eyes or open your eyes, whatever helps you to feel relaxed. And maybe I'll start with a few, if you want to use your hand to breathe into your tummy. You can do that. Well, God, here we each are, and we have created several moments this morning to be quiet and to just follow our breathing. And with whatever faith any of us can muster right now, we open ourselves to your wisdom and guidance in this moment for whatever current slate we have of sufferings. Maybe we are deep in the thick of one of those, long-standing sufferings that every person faces, where a loved one is near death, perhaps. Or maybe a loved one has died recently. Maybe we are experiencing some sort of limitation in our bodies or in society as we move about. Maybe we've been hurt in a relationship and it is staying with us. Maybe it was a long time ago, but it is still there. Splinters that we just run our hand over every once in a while when we didn't even realize it was there. Oh, that hurts. And as we sang, God, heal us. Join us as we move, as we attempt, as we try, as we do our best to move the pain through us. We don't want to get stuck in bitterness. We don't want to get stuck in cynicism or blame shifting. We want to move it through us. So we receive your healing this morning. And for those of us who our matters now that are coming to mind are less a splinter that hurts when we run our finger over it, and more just an enduring question. I have no idea what the hell I'm supposed to do. God, be that God of immediate, moment-to-moment guidance, luring us toward what is most beautiful and creative and kind and loving and just. What does it mean? What does it mean right now to receive your wisdom? What are you speaking to us in this moment? We open ourselves to that. In Jesus' name, amen. So every week when we're together, we have a chance for prayer in a one-to-one setting. It can be really hard, like being led in prayer in a group can, that works for me, but maybe you're just not sure it's working for you personally. That can happen even if you've been praying for 20 years like I have. So often what I will turn to in those moments is asking a trusted person to pray for me and pray with me and alongside me. So every week we offer that here. If you're not sure who that person would be in your life, we have a prayer team of folks that are trustworthy, and we promise are not going to give you any unasked for advice. And every week they are available to pray with you if you would welcome that. So after service today, after we close up with communion, in these seats over here, they're out of the way while everyone else is mingling and the tech team are cleaning up. Those folks will be here for prayer. I think we have Kevin who's available today and Mark who's available. Mark and Kevin, you want to raise your hands, and that's great. Kevin's over there in the back and Mark's over here in the middle. If at any point while we're cleaning up today, you would appreciate some prayer, grab one of them. They'd be so happy to pray with you. All right. do a little bit of housekeeping, and then you can close us.
Sounds good.
All right. Let me mention, as we do every week, that if you are new or newer with us, or you're not sure if we have your contact information yet, we would love to get your contact information so we can follow up with you, so we can, Hayley or I can connect with you for coffee, or we can help connect you with one of the small groups that are happening throughout the year here. So we have this QR code up on the screen, or if you're here in the theater, you can fill out a card that's in the center of the theater here right next to the coffee and just drop it in the basket there, and that will get to us. Again, we would love to connect with you. That'll put you on our email newsletter list so you find out what's going on each week here in our community, but also it would allow us to follow up with you and actually connect with you personally. As we're looking ahead here, next Sunday, I'm going to continue this series on the tensions of suffering, and I'm going to do a little bit of a historical look next week, so I think that will be useful for us. Outside of Sundays, I mentioned that we have our contemplative prayer meetups that are going to be next Saturday, the following Saturday, and the following Saturday after that. Those will be in the mornings, and they are in the Westridge Rogers Park area. So if you want to participate in those, there's still room. I think it's going to be a great group. We even actually have some folks who asked from afar, who would join us online every week because they're not in Chicago. They're like, can we participate in this? And we're going to make it work. We're going to open up a laptop and put some people on Zoom. So if you're from afar and you want to join us for contemplative prayer these next 3 Saturdays, please, you can join that way too. Drop it in Discord or grab me after service or whatever. We'll make sure that you get. Oh, and Melissa just dropped the link in Discord. So if you want to go to the page brownlinechurch.org/small groups, and you can get that. Let's see. We have some volunteer opportunities upcoming, but I don't think we have any information on yet. We're in talks with folks about trying to support some refugee families. Many of you know that the last year and a half has been a huge influx of asylum seekers from both Ukraine and Venezuela in particular, and so we have some folks who have been working on connecting our church to be a resource to a family or two. So we'll have more on that soon. We don't have enough to say on that right now. I'll mention our financial update that we'll do every week. If you get something out of this community, if you believe in the vision of this church, we would be so honored if you considered giving. Our general fund is how we keep the lights on, how our pastors pay the bills, and then our neighboring fund is how we serve our neighbors and help folks connected to our community in times of financial need. So that's how we're doing up there. And then there are lots of other ways that you can give beyond financially. If you want to give your time and help volunteer to show up early and stay late here at the theater on Sundays, we're always looking for new folks. We need another hospitality team, right? Mm-hmm. So in particular, if you are game for showing up early and staying late, hey, have we got a job for you? We're looking for another person or two to help with turning the Davis into a church every week. All right, that's what I got. I'll pass it back to you.
Each week, we close our time together with the practice of communion. Followers of Jesus across different time and culture and spaces have used communion as a way to acknowledge that we are in need of nourishment beyond what we can offer ourselves. And we find that nourishment in connection to a God of love and in connection with one another, being in community. So this is a shared meal that we get to participate in. If you're in the theater, we will pass around some juice and crackers in just a moment. And if you're joining from home, you can feel free to grab whatever is around you, something to eat and something to drink. Once we've passed out these elements, we will come back together and close and take them together. So hold on to them. We'll take them collectively. But this time is a wonderful time we love to lean into for conversation and getting to know people. So you can feel free to move around the theater, chat with people that you've known for a while, or maybe you're meeting for the first time. And then I will let us know when it's time to close in prayer together. So you can stand on up, and we'll get those things passed around.
Don't knock over the table.
All right. I don't want to interrupt too much good conversation, so feel free to hang around in the theater afterward and continue catching up with people. But if you would join me in taking communion. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he shared a meal with his community. And he broke bread, gave thanks, and said, "This is my body broken for you. Eat this in remembrance of me." Likewise, he took the cup and said, "This is my blood poured out. Drink of this in remembrance of me." And so, Jesus, this morning we remember that you are a God of compassion, that you are a God that is with us as life is unfolding, a life that holds both beauty and terror, a life of suffering and a life of hopefulness. And God, as we seek to make meaning, as we seek to move forward, as we seek to heal and to contribute to justice in the world, would we look to you as one who partners with us, as one who guides us, as one who offers us comfort and peace. I thank you for the gift of community and that we do not do this alone. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you all so much for being here, and we will see you next week.